بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Inshallah, in today's lecture we want to discuss the ritual acts of worship of a Muslim, or what are known as the 5 pillars of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, بني الإسلام على 5 شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة والحج وصوم رمضان. The Prophet ﷺ said, Islam is built upon 5 pillars, testifying that there is none worthy of worship except Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, establishing the prayers, giving the zakat, making the pilgrimage to the house, and fasting the month of Ramadan. Here in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ has given us a beautiful parable. He has given us a picture of Islam like a house or some kind of structure. And these pillars that he mentioned, these are the foundation. And the foundation of anything is the thing that other things are built upon. So in other words, these foundations should actually lead to many other things. I mean, it's true obviously that each one of these actions, like the prayers and zakat and so forth, each one of these actions are actions that are acts of worship in themselves, and they are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are very important acts. But at the same time, they are not the end of the acts of a Muslim, and they are not even the end of what they should bring about in the Muslim themselves. We just finished speaking about beliefs, the articles of belief. And similar like the articles of belief, you can meet many Muslims who can rattle off all of the articles of belief. You know, Tawheed, there's 3 categories, and belief in this and that is comprised of these components and this and this. But that's about the limits of what they know about it. They don't realize what kind of effect and what kind of influence it's supposed to have on their lives. So they can rattle off all this information, but they're clueless sometimes, unfortunately, about, well, what does this mean for them? How are they internalizing it, and how are they acting upon those beliefs? Similarly, these acts of worship, unfortunately, if you look at the Muslim world, in some cases these acts of worship have become the be-all and end-all of Islam. And Islam doesn't have much effect upon the individual or much influence upon the individual, other than the fact that he's still adhering to these basic pillars of Islam and maybe a few other things in his life. While in reality, that is not even what these pillars are supposed to be about. These pillars form the foundations. These are the foundations, and built upon them should be all of the other acts of Islam. And so inshallah, in this lecture, I want to give a brief introduction to these different pillars of Islam, and maybe speak a little bit about their importance. And again, due to time limitations, and also due to the fact that, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of literature available about all of these different pillars, we will not be able to cover the entire topic in detail. But unfortunately, even by the way, much of the literature that's available in English on these different pillars, most of them cover these pillars just from a legal perspective. You know, how are you supposed to pray? What you do, what you don't do, and what you do if you do this, it's wrong, and so forth. How to fast and so forth. There's not much reflection on what is the long-run influence that these actions should have upon you as an individual. Inshallah, we'll try to touch upon some of these components as we give this lecture today, inshallah. First of all, you have to realize that all of these ritual acts of worship have both an external component as well as an internal component. And this has been mentioned by the scholars, and First of all, they speak about the fact that for any act of worship to be acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has to meet two conditions. The first condition, and these are not necessarily in order of importance, but the two conditions go together. The first condition is the act must be proper and correct according to Allah's guidance. So for example, if you're going to perform the prayer, you have to perform it according to the way that Allah has ordered us to perform it in the Quran and the Sunnah. If you're going to fast, you fast the proper way, and so forth. So it must be correct. You must do your best. You must do your best to know how to pray and then implement it properly. And secondly, the act must be done solely and purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The act must be a true act of worship solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran,
فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا.
So whoever hopes for the meeting with his Lord, let him work righteousness and associate none as a partner in the worship of his Lord. Commenting on this verse, a Muslim scholar, Ibn al-Qayyim, wrote, this is in reference to the only type of deed that Allah will accept. The deed must be in accordance with the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah and done solely for the sake of pleasing Allah. And then he continues, by the way, by saying that obviously this can only be fulfilled if someone has the knowledge of how the Prophet ﷺ performed the actions. And he also must have the knowledge of who it is that he is worshipping. If he's not knowledgeable of who it is that he is worshipping, then he cannot intend only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his deeds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires of us that we have purity in our hearts. It is this purity that leads to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being pleased with the deed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, tells us in the Quran that He created life and death. As you see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور.
Blessed is he in whose hand is the dominion, and he is the one who decrees all things, who has created death and life, that he may test you, which of you is the best indeed. He is the Almighty, the oft-forgiving. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that part of the purpose of this creation, why He has put us here, He's seeing and He's asking of us which one of us is the best with respect to the quality of our deeds, not necessarily with respect to the quantity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking for the best deeds, not the most deeds. And as some of the scholars explained, the best deeds mean the purest deeds and the action which is the correct action. For example, one scholar said, if a deed is sincere and pure but not correct, it is not accepted. If it is correct but not pure and sincere, it is not accepted. It will not be accepted until it is both pure and correct. If it is pure, it means it is done solely for the sake of Allah, and if it is correct, it means it is done according to the Sunnah of the Prophet. So that's an important point to always keep in mind when you're performing any of these pillars of Islam and any of these ritual acts. So we've already discussed the Shahada. Obviously, that is the action that we take upon entering into Islam. And we'll discuss, therefore, the ritual acts, starting with establishing of the prayers. It is interesting to note when you read the Quran and when you read the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the continual command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with respect to the prayers is not simply the command just to pray. Allah does not tell us just pray. Every Muslim must pray. And in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ did not say that prayer is one of the pillars of Islam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to establish the prayers. What is known in Arabic as iqamat al-salat. Iqamah, to establish the prayers. Okay, so there must be some distinction between just praying and establishing the salat. Establishing the salat means to perform it properly and completely according to the manner in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us in the Quran and the Sunnah. And this distinction in the wording means that there could be many people who pray. You could find people who are praying, but they are not really establishing the salat. They are not really fulfilling the salat. It is similar to what has been quoted from Umar ibn al-Khattab, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, about the pilgrimage to Mecca. He said, the number who perform the Hajj are few, while the riders, the number of people who are there riding on their animals and going around and being present at the Hajj are many. Those who perform the Hajj are few, while those who are actually there doing all the rituals and everything, there are many. So he's talking about the fact that actually those who are performing this Hajj in the proper manner and really doing it properly with the correct intention and everything, and inshallah therefore getting the proper results from it, those are actually few in number, even though there might be a large mass of people performing the Hajj. Similarly, you might find a large number of people who are praying, but those who are really establishing the salat and performing the salat in the proper manner, with all of its conditions and with all of its guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, those might be very few indeed. And as we said, the salat is both. The salat, like all the other rituals, it has external aspects as well as internal aspects. The internal aspect of khushu', for example, of feeling of submissiveness and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the salat, in the prayer. These have to be there. These are components of the prayer. Okay, the prayer is not just the actual physical action of bowing and prostrating and so forth, but also what is in your heart. And if you really want to fulfill the prayer properly, then your mind and your heart have to be conscious of what you are doing. And you must have this feeling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of submission, of humbleness and calmness and so forth throughout the prayer. And I emphasize this fact because since the prayer is done 5 times a day, and besides the obligatory prayer, there's also lots of sunnah prayers, it is easy for it to turn into some kind of just a mere ritual without much meaning to it. Some kind of custom. As I said earlier, this is what we do. We Muslims, we go and pray, we bow, we bow, we prostrate and so forth. We must be very careful never to allow our prayers to get to that point. And if we find our prayers getting to that point, then we have to realize there is something wrong. That this is not what the prayer is all about. And if the prayer is getting to that point, then we should not be surprised if the prayer actually has no effect on us whatsoever. We can pray, and as soon as we leave the prayer, we're back doing whatever it is we were doing before, whether it is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or whatever. When we approach the prayer, we should approach it with the intention, again, of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trying to get as much from the prayer as we can. This may take some effort on our part. This will take some conscious thinking on our part. But in the long run, inshallah, it'll definitely be to our benefit. The Prophet ﷺ has told us actually that someone may leave the prayer and not get much from the prayer. The Prophet ﷺ has told us that a person may finish from the prayer, leave from the prayer, and all that is recorded of him, of his prayer, is 1/10 of it, or 1/9, or 1/8, or 1/7, or 1/6, or 1/5, or 1/4, 1/3, or 1/2. So we should keep this point in mind. The Prophet ﷺ is telling us we might go to the prayer and only 1/10 of it is recorded for us. We shouldn't be satisfied with that. We should think about where the difference lies and how, inshallah, we can improve our prayer. Because of the actions of Islam and of the acts of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the prayer is from amongst the most important. Maybe even you could argue it is the most important. And in fact, it is the first thing that we will be held accountable for on the Day of Judgment. As the Prophet ﷺ has told us, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ مَا يُحَاسَبُ بِهِ الْعَبْدُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ مِنْ عَمَلِهِ صَلَاتُهُ. The Prophet ﷺ said that the first matter that the slave will be held accountable for on the Day of Judgment is the prayer. Then he said, if it is good, then the person will be successful and prosperous. Or another narration, if it is good, then the rest of his deeds will be good. This demonstrates to us, number one, the importance of the salat, and number two, the fact that there must be some relationship between the salat, the prayer, and the rest of his deeds. Because if it is good, then the rest of his deeds should be good. If it is good, then he is successful. So if he's performing the prayers properly, then there should be some relationship between the prayers and the rest of his deeds. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually alluded to that fact in the Quran. If you attend the prayer with the humble submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it should have an effect on you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ.
Verily the prayer keeps one from the great sins and evil deeds. Verily the prayer keeps one from the great sins and evil deeds. Okay, obviously we're not just talking about a prayer which is just the physical. I mean the physical aspects are important. We have to do them properly also. Because all of them work together, by the way. If you perform the outward aspects of the prayer properly, this should also affect the inward aspects. Right? If you bow properly and you're really bowing properly and you are coming to a rest in that position, and so therefore you're sitting there you're staying there for some time and realizing where you are, and then you stand up straight and you feel humble in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you bow properly. All of these actions, both the physical aspects work hand in hand with the spiritual or mental aspects to, inshallah, improve your salat. And inshallah, if you perform the salat properly, inshallah, this will lead to the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Prophet ﷺ stated in the hadith, خمس صلوات افترضهن الله تعالى من أحسن وضوءهن وصلاهن لوقتهن وأتم ركوعهن وخشوعهن كان له على الله عهد أن يغفر له ومن لم يفعل فليس له على الله عهد إن شاء غفر له وإن شاء عذبه. The Prophet ﷺ said, Allah has obligated 5 prayers. Whoever excellently performs their ablutions, prays them in their proper times, completes their bows and prostrations and khushu'. Khushu' here means where your heart is attuned to the prayer, the feeling of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the person who has done this, has met these conditions, he has a promise from Allah that Allah will forgive him. And whoever does not do this, then he has no promise from Allah. Allah may either forgive him or He may punish him. I mean, even if you just think about the salat, if you think about the salat and the fact that you are consciously going to the prayer and standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 5 times a day. So basically, as you're going through the day, either you have just come from praying, or you're going to be praying sometime within the next few hours. Constantly during your day, you know that you are in between the salawat. This in itself is a kind of constant reminder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This in itself should have an effect upon you. And then when you actually go to the prayer, and perform the prayer, then this should be a further kind of purification of your soul. And you should come out of the prayer being like renewed and reinvigorated. The Prophet ﷺ asked his companions, if someone had a stream outside of his house and he would bathe in it 5 times a day, would there be any filth remaining on him? He said, no, obviously. There wouldn't be any filth remaining on him. Bathing 5 times a day in the stream in front of your house, there shouldn't be any filth remaining on you. And the Prophet ﷺ then said that فَذَلِكَ مِثْلُ الصَّلَوَاتِ الْخَمْسِ, that this is similar to the 5 daily prayers. يَمْحُ اللَّهُ بِهِ الْخَطَايَا, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wipes away due to them the sins. So it is a repeated act of purification. And so therefore when you come out of the prayer, you should feel purified and renewed, you're spiritually renewed and reinvigorated. And this should re-energize you to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and try to continue to worship Allah and obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in between these different prayers. Now the prayer, as I said, is definitely one of the most important acts in Islam. I think it's hard to even imagine a religion in which there's no such thing as prayer or something similar to prayer. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us in numerous places in the Quran to establish the salat. You find this command over and over again. And not only that, the Prophet ﷺ has made it very clear that the attending to the prayer is actually one of the demarcations between Islam and disbelief. Islam and kufr, what they call kufr. This is important obviously for a new Muslim to recognize, that becoming lackadaisical with respect to the prayer, this is very dangerous. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ بَيْنَ الرَّجُلِ وَبَيْنَ الشِّرْكِ وَالْكُفْرِ تَرْكَ الصَّلَاةِ. The Prophet ﷺ said, between a man and shirk, polytheism, and disbelief, kufr, is the abandoning of the prayer. So as I said, especially a new Muslim, he must be very careful about the salat and do his best to try to perform the salat. As I said, it is a basic component of Islam. And inshallah it will benefit you. And the more you adhere to the salat, inshallah, hopefully the quality of your salat over time will also improve. And this will also help your Islam as a whole. Okay, so do your best never to become lackadaisical with respect to the salat. And perform the salat. And do your best to perform the salat at the proper times. Okay, I'm not going to be able, obviously, to get into how to pray exactly and the rules regarding the salat. But I want to make some important points. And one of the important points is that the prayers are to be performed at specific times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran,
إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا.
Verily the prayers are enjoined on the believers at stated times. And I'm going to talk about this point a little bit because I know I've met many converts in the past who were confused on this point. For each prayer there is a period of time during which that prayer is supposed to be performed. Okay, so for example, the noon prayer, it might start at 12:30, and the time for the noon prayer continues, let's say, until 3:30. So any time during that time, you can pray. From the time of the start of the prayer time until the end of the prayer time. Unfortunately, some Muslims, due to whatever reasons, some Muslims actually delay all of their prayers until the end of the day, and they think, okay, they're going to pray all of them at the end of the day. They pray the noon, the afternoon, the sunset, and the night prayers and so forth, together at home, let's say. And in particular, new converts. New converts during the daytime, let's say at work, they might find it difficult, or maybe they're still a little bit shy or embarrassed to pray, and so therefore they might end up delaying the prayer, or if they're living at home, they don't want their families to see them praying or something of this nature, and so therefore they delay all their prayers until they find some time that they can perform the prayers. I don't know what to tell you exactly about this, except for the fact that it is very dangerous. The idea of delaying your prayers beyond their stated times, this is not proper whatsoever. And in general, you have to pray them within their specific times. But if you find, for some reason, due to work or something else, that you do have to combine some prayers, and you really are in a situation where you feel it is difficult for you to pray, then you may combine the noon and the afternoon prayers from any time from the beginning of the noon until the ending of the afternoon prayer times. You may combine the noon and afternoon prayers. And you may combine the sunset and night prayers at any time of the sunset or night prayer times. So you can combine the noon and afternoon prayers, pray them together. And you could also combine the sunset and night prayers and pray them together. But no other combinations are feasible. So if for some reason you really find that you have to, for example, delay the noon prayer, make sure you do not delay it until sunset. Make sure you pray the noon and the afternoon prayer sometime before sunset. And you always pray the prayers in order. Even if you are late, for example, for the noon prayer, you pray it first and then you pray the afternoon prayer in general. Be careful not to make this a regular practice. I want to stress also the importance of the congregational prayers, of going to the mosque and praying in congregation. There are numerous hadith, and also many verses in the Quran that refer to the importance of the prayer in congregation. And so there are lots of special virtues with respect to the prayer congregation. I'm not going to get into those right now, but I want to emphasize the importance of prayer in congregation for the new Muslim. There are a lot of benefits and a lot of importance to praying the prayer in congregation, especially for the new Muslim. This is based on my own personal experience and experience of many Muslims I know. So, for example, when you go to the mosque and attend the congregational prayers, first of all, it demonstrates your seriousness in Islam. It shows that you are serious about the most basic act of the faith. And this will immediately send a good sign to the other Muslims in your community, that you are, you've just converted and you are actually serious about Islam. Because many Muslims convert and then you never see them again, or you just see them on Friday, or you just see them Ramadan, and they become like Muslims who don't really care about Islam. They've converted, but they don't care about Islam. So by going to the mosque regularly and attending the congregational prayers, you are sending a sign to your fellow Muslims that yes, you are serious about Islam. And if you show that you are serious about Islam, then they will take you seriously as a Muslim. And when they take you seriously as a Muslim, they will show you respect, they will try to help you, they'll do whatever they can, inshallah, to improve your Islam and to make your life as a Muslim as trouble-free as possible. Let's put it that way. So it is a sign, it is a very important sign of your seriousness to Islam, and this will reflect, or this will be seen by the other Muslims. Secondly, it is also a good opportunity for you to meet with other Muslims and to see other Muslims and perhaps befriend other Muslims. And hopefully, inshallah, those Muslims who attend the mosque on a regular basis, inshallah, they are also from the more sincere Muslims and the more dedicated Muslims. So you are able to meet these more dedicated Muslims, and inshallah, you will be able to create a friendship between you and them, and you will be able to benefit from their example. I cannot express to you from my own experience how important it is to learn from the example of other Muslims. You know, you can read in books. You can read in books about how to pray. You can read in books about how Muslims are supposed to behave and what are the manners and the behavior. You can even buy lectures and CDs about this topic. But there's nothing, at least from my own experience, there's nothing as good and as influential upon you as seeing a live example, seeing a Muslim who is actually applying these behaviors, applying this Islam right in front of you. The effect of that will be long, long lasting. You'll really believe, yes, this is the way that you're supposed to act. And you can see that people do actually take it seriously and they do apply it. And you see how beautiful it is in front of you. So therefore, inshallah, when you go to the mosque and you find these kind of people, first of all, if you don't go to the mosque except maybe Fridays, then you're just going to be meeting a mass of people, and who knows who's good, who's bad, who's what. You know. But if you go to the mosque regularly, inshallah, you'll be meeting these serious people. And if you befriend them, inshallah, and come into contact more with them, you'll not only, inshallah, get some of their knowledge via conversations or whatever with them, but you will also be able to benefit from how they act, how they behave. You'll see, inshallah, Islam being implemented in front of you. The companions, mashallah, they had the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They could see how Islam was being implemented in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there's no doubt that that had an effect upon them as well. And so therefore, when you go to the mosque, inshallah, and you can befriend someone of this nature, that will, inshallah, have a great effect upon you. As I said, I can tell you this from my own personal experiences, and how seeing certain individuals and how they're behaving and how they implement Islam, how that greatly helped me in my own Islam. And not only that, inshallah, if you can find these kinds of friends, because a new Muslim, you know, a convert to Islam, probably still have a lot of non-Muslim friends. And so now when you spend your time, if you continue to spend your time with your non-Muslim friends, chances are they're not really going to help your Islam very much. In fact, they might drag you back down to where you were before. This is a common thing with people who, and excuse me for making this analogy, but this is a common thing with people who go to prison. You know, some people go to prison for 2 years and then they come back, they come out of prison and they go back right to the same people who really led them to go into prison in the first place. And what do you know? And some of them, unfortunately, are even Muslims. They go into prison and they become Muslim, and you see them in the prison. I worked for a while as a chaplain. You see them in the prison and they are practicing and talking about Islam and this and this. They get out of the prison, they go right back to their old friends, and then in a year or two you see them once again in the prison. You ask them what happened. Oh, you know, I did this and this and this. And then once again they're a Muslim in the prison again. So you still have all your old friends from before Islam. And obviously, I mean, even if they don't necessarily have a bad intention, but obviously they're going to lead you and try to influence you to do things like what you used to do and do things maybe which go against Islam. But if you attend the mosque regularly and start befriending Muslims, then inshallah you'll be spending more of your time with Muslims, and you will inshallah cancel any negative effect that you might have from non-Muslim friends. Also, by attending the mosque, it is a good opportunity for you to increase your knowledge of Islam. Because as I said, if you attend the mosque on a regular basis, again, not just for the Friday prayer, but if you try your best to attend the mosque on a regular basis, the chances are better that you will meet, inshallah, those individuals in your community who have more knowledge. And so therefore, you'll be able to sit with them, or you'll be able to talk to them, and you'll have the opportunity to ask them questions, and they'll be able to guide you and assist you. By the way, these positive benefits of attending the mosque for a new convert, obviously they apply both to brothers as well as sisters. The emphasis in Islam on the congregational prayer, the emphasis is more for the men. In fact, some scholars even say it's obligatory upon the men, the 5 daily prayers in congregation. But the sisters also, and this depends really on the community that you are in. If you are fortunate enough to be in a community that is large, for example, and has sisters regularly attending the mosque, inshallah, this may be a good opportunity for you, again, to try to attend the mosque and therefore, inshallah, meet those sisters in your community that will have the kind of effect upon you that I described earlier. Now, by the way, with respect to the prayer, as we mentioned before, the Quran is in Arabic. And so therefore, to recite the Quran in the prayer, you have to recite in Arabic. You cannot recite the English translation of the Quran. This is not the Quran. And in fact, the rest of the prayer, although some people might have a differing view, I think all of the prayer, inshallah, should be said in Arabic. So until you actually learn the prayer and until you actually learn Al-Fatiha, which is the opening surah of the Quran that you have to read in every rak'ah, every unit of the prayer, until you learn these words, then as the Prophet ﷺ taught one of his companions, until you learn the prayer, until you learn Al-Fatiha, then you just say these expressions. Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Subhanallah, this is an expression that means how great and how excellent and how exalted is Allah, above any kind of imperfection, above any kind of pardon and so forth. Alhamdulillah, this means all praise and thanks is due to Allah. La ilaha illallah, there's none worthy of worship except Allah. Allahu Akbar, Allah is greatest. And there's no power, no might except in Allah. So you repeat these throughout the prayer, and of course, obviously, you don't just repeat them, but you think about what they mean. You think about what it is that you are expressing until you can, inshallah, learn the prayer. As you begin to memorize the Quran, do your best, if possible. And again, this will depend a lot on where you happen to be, where you converted and so forth. But do your best to learn the Quran and to learn the words of the prayer from a native Arabic speaker or from someone who knows how to pronounce the words properly. Do not, this is my recommendation to you, and this is a recommendation based on, again, my own experience. Do not rely on transliterations, because unless you really know how the letters are pronounced, you're most likely going to be mispronouncing things. And what happens is once you learn them incorrectly, it becomes difficult then to start to try to learn them correctly. So even with respect to the Quran, as you memorize the Quran, as you start memorizing parts of the Quran, try to learn them from someone who can teach you them properly, even with all of what they call the tajweed. Because for you to try to come along later and then fix everything, as I said, I can tell you from personal experience, this is not that easy, especially as you get older. And this is another recommendation that I have, that I can give you. It's a well-known theory among linguists, or I guess they may be even considered a fact. But the older you are, and especially even if you're above like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, the more and more difficult it is to learn a foreign language and to learn it without, learn how to speak it in particular. And in particular to be able to speak it without an accent. So my recommendation to you is to try to start getting into at least how to pronounce Arabic and the basics of Arabic as soon as feasibly possible. You don't want to spend all your time on this and not learn, some of the more important aspects of the deen at the same time. But try to start this as early as possible. And if you are still relatively young, in your late teens or early 20s, don't miss this opportunity, don't miss this time to try to learn this. Okay? Some people I've known, including myself, after I became Muslim, I kind of left this area for a little while, and therefore I will always have an accent when I speak Arabic. It will not be as proper, for example, as a native Arabic speaker and so forth. So try to take advantage of your youth, inshallah, of your young age, and try to start learning at least how to pronounce and getting the sounds down as soon as you can, and learn them directly from someone who knows how to pronounce them properly. Another one of the pillars of Islam, of course, is the zakat, the giving of zakat. The word zakat actually comes from the same root, the same word that means purification and blessing and growth. So for example, we find in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
قد أفلح من تزكى.
Indeed, whosoever purifies himself, from the same root as zakat, whoever purifies himself shall achieve success. But when we're speaking about zakat as one of the pillars of Islam, obviously we're talking about the giving of a specific portion of one's wealth on a yearly basis to specific groups of recipients. Okay, so there's a certain portion of your wealth which is going to be 2.5%. In general, it's 2.5% of the wealth that you have had now for a period of 1 year. It's not actually on income, but it is on wealth. And you are supposed to take this money and you give it to certain categories of people. You don't just give them to anybody, obviously. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Tawbah, in the 9th Surah, verse 60, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the different categories. But for the sake of time, inshallah, we will not go into that right now. The great importance of zakat can be seen by the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions over and over again in the Quran, salat and the zakat. The prayer and the zakat are mentioned together over and over in the Quran. It's like 82 different places in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them together. And this is a clear sign, since we know the importance of the zakat, this is a clear sign of the importance of giving the zakat. The giving of the zakat has many purposes behind it. As I said, it comes from the same root as purification and blessing and growth. So it actually works to purify the wealth of the individual who is giving zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
خذ من أموالهم صدقة تطهرهم وتزكيهم بها. Talking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, take alms from their wealth in order to purify them and sanctify them with it. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, whoever pays the zakat on his wealth will have its evil removed from him. So the individual himself is being purified, and his wealth is being purified by the giving of zakat. Now obviously, zakat also has a very important role to play for society, because it is money that is collected, it is given to the poor, it is given to the needy. But and this obviously should strengthen the bonds of brotherhood within the society. The poor are being helped by the rich. They all realize that they are supposed to be brothers and loving and helping one another for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are all part of the same community. But for the one who is giving zakat, there are many benefits actually for him, and many ways in which this can affect his being. One of the things that many people feel when they have money, the stinginess and greediness obviously are very dangerous diseases. But many times people feel like they cannot afford to give away money. They cannot afford to give money to others. And they are afraid to lose some of their money. They're afraid even to give someone else some money. And they think, there's some harm, there's going to be some great loss to them, or they're never going to be able to get that money back, and so forth. So Allah has commanded us, if we have a certain amount of money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us every year that we have to give this money. And when we give this money, and we give it away, and we realize, well, what do you know? We gave this money away, and we didn't die, we didn't starve, we're still okay, and we're still buying the things that we need, and so forth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this command of zakat makes us realize that we can give money away and it's not going to kill us. So this makes the person realize that yes, he can give money away. And inshallah, if he realizes this fact, he will not just give money away in zakat and give charity in zakat, but he will also give voluntary charity. Because he knows that it's not going to be the end of his life if he gives up some money. And this is a lesson that he has learned from the fact that he is obligated to give up some money. And when he gives up that money, he says, oh, mashallah, nothing really negative happened to me. And so therefore I can give money for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once he experiences, by the way, even though it is obligatory, but inshallah, once he experiences the feeling of giving money to others and seeing how they benefit from it, and how he'll see that this is really something good, and he'll think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah's pleasure upon him, inshallah this will encourage him to become more and more generous. So this will remove from him some of these diseases of stinginess, as I said, and of greed that can be so dangerous for an individual. Instead, inshallah, he will become someone who realizes he can give, and he will start to enjoy the pleasure of giving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so therefore he will give, inshallah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with him. I think that's all that I will mention, inshallah, about the zakat right now, and we'll move on to the fast of Ramadan. The fast of the month of Ramadan, next pillar of Islam, of course, it refers to abstaining from eating and drinking and sexual intercourse during the daytime of the month of Ramadan. And Ramadan obviously is one of the months of the Islamic calendar. And many religions also have this concept, like the prayer, have this concept of fasting. Because fasting should really have an effect upon a person. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the command to fast, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون.
O believers, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, that you may attain taqwa. And this term, taqwa, is a very comprehensive term. You can understand it to mean fear of God and God consciousness and self-restraint and piety. All of these should be developed through the act of fasting. Because when you fast, you become even more conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as you go through your day, you are going to be reminded of the fact that you are thirsty. You're going to be reminded of the fact that you are hungry. You yourself would do that to yourself. You don't need other people to tell you, hey, it's time for lunch, let's go. But you will be thinking about the fact that you are hungry and thirsty. And every time you think about it, and every time you see other people drinking or eating or whatever, for example, especially here in a non-Muslim land, and you'll realize, oh, I can't do that. Why am I not doing it? These are all ways by which you're constantly going to be remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this month of Ramadan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly going to be on your mind, and you're going to develop a greater consciousness and realization of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this month of Ramadan. And so therefore, when you're also thinking about, or when the temptation comes to you to do something wrong during this month of Ramadan, well, you are more aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so therefore you will also keep yourself from doing other things. And so during this month of Ramadan, you develop a kind of patience. You develop an understanding that you have the ability to control yourself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. During the month of Ramadan, you control yourself with respect to some of the most basic things you need. You may become very thirsty during the month of Ramadan. You may become very hungry during the month of Ramadan. And yet you control yourself. You don't drink, you don't eat. Why? Simply for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Simply because you know that these things are haram, they are forbidden for you during the daytime of the month of Ramadan. And so therefore you demonstrate to yourself actually your own potential. You make yourself realize that you have the ability. You have the ability, if you really want to do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have the ability to raise yourself above your needs, your desires, your wants, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the same way, then, during this month of Ramadan, that you can elevate yourself not to eat or drink for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're also showing yourself that you can do other things also for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, during the month of Ramadan, if you look unfortunately in the Muslim countries, you'll find, for example, smoking. Smoking, by the way, if you ask me, smoking is haram, but none of you just now asked me, so I'll throw that out to you. But if you go to Muslim countries, now if you think about smoking, smoking is addicting, right? Over here we have the patch and we have all these things trying to help people to give up smoking. And yet if you go to the Muslim world, you'll find Muslims that as soon as sunset comes during Ramadan, the whole day they kept themselves from smoking. They realized that smoking is wrong, that they cannot do it during the daytime of Ramadan. And even though this thing is greatly addicting, and even though we see, for example, in this society how difficult it is for people to give up smoking, during the month of Ramadan, during the daytime, they do not smoke. Now, yeah, as soon as sunset comes, they think, okay, now it's okay. Now we can even, unfortunately in the Muslim world, in many places they think, as soon as sunset comes, you can even do any haram. This is, obviously wrong, and I hope none of you fall into that kind of situation. But it shows that even these people who are doing this act, even these people can elevate themselves above this supposed need and addiction for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the fasting of the month of Ramadan really demonstrates to ourselves what kind of willpower and what kind of strength we really can have for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so now it's a matter of taking that from the month of Ramadan and channeling that into our lives throughout the rest of the year. Okay, now there's a lot of special characteristics with respect to Ramadan. There's a lot of things that go on during Ramadan that further assist us and make us able to do these things during the month of Ramadan. But if we really increased our taqwa, if we really get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the month of Ramadan, it should be reflected as well after the month of Ramadan is finished. Because you don't just worship Allah during the month of Ramadan, but you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the whole year. So if it was a true act of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that should continue to have an influence on the person after he fasts the month of Ramadan. Ibn Uthaymeen was once asked about if a person embraces Islam during the daytime of Ramadan, someone became Muslim during the daytime of Ramadan, should he begin fasting immediately? He says, if a non-Muslim embraces Islam during the daytime of Ramadan, it is obligatory upon him to fast the remainder of that day, as he is now one of the people upon whom the fasting is obligatory. However, he does not have to make up that day at a later date, since he missed part of the day. He doesn't have to worry about that, because that wasn't obligatory upon him. And he continues, similarly, he does not have to make up the days of that month of Ramadan that he did not fast before becoming Muslim. So if he became Muslim on the 20th of Ramadan, well, now the fasting becomes obligatory upon him, so the last 10 days of Ramadan are obligatory upon him. He doesn't have to worry about the previous 20 days because those were not obligatory upon him because he was not a Muslim. And the last of the 5 pillars, of course, is the Hajj, or the pilgrimage to Mecca. The pilgrimage in which one journeys to the Kaaba, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Mecca, and to perform all of the rites that are associated with that. And this is, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the opportunity to perform the Hajj soon. And this is an event which it is hard to describe. If you haven't experienced it, there's many aspects of it that are hard to describe. And there are many things that you'll get from the experience. And in fact, for example, when I made Hajj, the things that I remember the most and the things that I got out of it from a spiritual point of view are very much different from things that other people have mentioned. There's so many aspects to it. There's so much involved in it. And there's so much that you can get out of it. But we don't have the time right now to get into these things, so I'm not going to actually comment upon it. But I will tell you that there are some organizations that assist in helping Muslims go to make Hajj. And in particular, in the United States in particular, at least there used to be, I think there still are, some organizations that are actually concentrate on taking converts to Islam, new Muslims and converts to Islam, and taking them to the Hajj and giving them programs that are relevant to them, to teach them about Islam while they're making the Hajj and so forth. And inshallah, I recommend that if you can benefit from that, that will be very good, inshallah.